Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Revolution Gathering. This morning my first wife Amanda sent me a text message letting me know that my friend Bobby had passed away, and nobody was sure when or how, but that he had passed. She had found out through family members who found out through his ex-wife that he was gone. And so today's a bit of a memorial for me, for Bobby. Bobby was the best man in my first wedding. We were very close. I talked a little bit about this in a short video I did. Bobby introduced me to Brennan Manning books. He gave me this book that really changed my life. It was the first book I think I ever read all the way through. It was called, besides the Outsiders in high school, it was called When Being Good Isn't Good Enough. So we both had this taste for grace. Now, how I met Bobby was he was a youth minister, and he had heard that I'd been speaking about grace and things like this, and I was trying to get this thing called Revolution off the ground and was struggling to do it, and he invited me to come speak to his, and it was at the time he was the children's minister, so come speak to the kids, which I was like, okay, I'll try to make this work for the kids. And ended up really falling in love with a lot of those kids. He later became a high school pastor, and those kids moved on with him, and a lot of those kids became like essential foundations part of Revolution, which is wild because I ended up taking a year in LA trying to do Revolution in LA and came back, and me and Bobby remained friends through that. We hit it off. You know, we were talking about grace, and he started saying, "Oh, you got to check out this book. You got to read this." And so I started digging in deeper even to it, and we really became connected. And we were very different. I mean, he worked for a big church, very big church, in Atlanta, and you know, all sorts of stuff. And one of the things he helped me do is he said, "Hey, they're going to throw this festival, Mount Perrin Church of God is what it was called. They're going to throw this music festival, and it's going to be called Life Fest, and they want to have like an underground stage with all these cool bands and stuff, but we want you to come help us do that." And so I came as kind of an advisor originally, and then they ended up putting me and Bobby ahead to run this whole underground stage. And it was great because I was able to get all these different bands from all over the place to come play. We got Stave Saker to come out, and the Honeytons, and who else? All sorts of like bands that aren't even around anymore. But we got to put on this really great stage, and it was so funny because it shows you how. One of the things it showed me is how nervous big denominations and big churches get, because at one point they called the police on our stage. And I'm like, guys, this is part of the festival. Why are you calling the police on this stage? It makes no sense. Because they thought, oh, they're moshing and they're hurting. No, this is part of the culture. But me and Bobby became, I mean, we were just friends who were, we would go see Brennan Manning speak. If he was within a few hours, we'd get in a car and we'd drive out and see him speak. You know, we were kind of like an odd couple, because here was this youth pastor at this big giant church, you know, and I was always showing up for lunch, and me and him would sit and we would talk about all these things and talk about the Bible and talk about free will versus predestination and all the weird little theological things that drove us crazy. And we just became great friends. And I ended up moving away for a year after the festival, and then coming back. And then Bobby was doing high school stuff, and he's like, you got to come speak to my group again. And we did. And I had actually started Revolution Now as a church. And so a few of his kids came and ended up working with Revolution and really becoming leaders in Revolution, or at least staples within that, like the core group. And I was lucky because there were so many great kids involved. And I can remember when this big church didn't know what to do, there was a runaway. And so they called me and Bobby to go look for this runaway. And that we were having to go into clubs and dark night. One of the kids' moms pulled a gun out on us because we had came to the house to talk to one of the kids, but it was so late. And I'll never forget that. And we looked like the world's worst undercover policemen. Here these two little young pastor guys. Bobby was just a few years older than me, but he looked totally like a square. And here I was like punk, but I looked like an undercover cop dressed as a punk because I was old, and we're like the oldest guys in the room. Like, have you seen this girl? We ended up finding her and being okay, but it was. We just had a lot of weird experiences together, but we were always able to have these great conversations. We were always able to disagree with each other and, still be friends. This was really before I even, when everybody was saying I was emergent, but before I really got to be a part of that community. And so Bobby was my friend. He was my best friend at the time. And we were different, it reminded me a lot of me and my buddy Chuck, who was a Satanist. In our friendship, we were just, there was a different tie that binded us together. So anyway, Bobby ended up being my best man in my wedding, and my dad did the wedding, and it was it was cool to have him there. But just this we had a great friendship, and one day we had a few things. We shared some losses together. When one day we were meeting for lunch, and I showed up, and he wasn't there. And I find out his father had a heart attack and passed away. And, we went through that morning together, and, just the loss of a loved one. And I remember how packed his father's funeral was. His father was a well-loved man, and Bobby was well-loved, and it was just so many people there that, I just came in and I hugged Bobby and said, call me if you need me. You got a lot of people here, and I don't want to get in the way. Just call me if you need me. And that was the type of friendship we had, was we could communicate like that, with a hug and I'm here. And our wives were friends. We spent time together. And so, this was a great guy. I talked to a friend of ours today who was a member of his youth group. He's just like, there's not a week I don't talk about Bobby and the influence he had on my life and how he got me to go into the work that I do today, And so one day Bobby came to me and said, I've made a huge mistake, and there's been a big mistake that's happened. And it's going to cost me my marriage and my job. And we talked about what to do and how, the really horrific, hard steps he was going to have to take to move forward. And he did that. But unfortunately, Bobby, here's this guy who knew so much about grace, but Bobby had a lot of shame around failing his marriage and the trust of the people that he was around him. And he just started to back away. But Bobby had a group of people who really loved him, including some of my in-laws and stuff, and we all really were doing our best to work with Bobby and his wife at the time, just to try to see if there was anything that we could help restore. If there was restoration, was restore the marriage, restore them, at least allow them to have an act, a ceremonial divorce, if that was whatever was gonna happen. And I could see the shame in his eyes, this constant shame, and I would say, listen, dude, you screwed up, and that's life, and life happens. But this is why we talk about grace. We always say, grace isn't just for other people. Grace isn't just for the community and the people we talk to. Forgiveness is not about just what we deliver. We also have grace. We also have forgiveness. We are accepted. The first time I'd heard about Paul Tillich was actually in the back of a Brennan Manning book that Bobby gave me. And I ended up keeping his copy. I remember I called him one day and said, listen, man, I have to underline this book, so you're going to have to get a new copy. He's like, but I underlined it. I'm like, yeah, well, I've already underlined it a lot too. So I still have it. We ended up having Brennan Manning sign it when we went to see him speak. I remember we got so excited about the music festival. We had gone to Hot Topics, Still a little old to be there probably, but I still go. I'm 48. And got these shirts that said, we're the Christians the devil warned you about. And we thought, oh, we're so edgy. It was just really funny because we just always challenge. Like I remember when we were having a meeting with the organizers of this festival, and they're like, okay, we need to get people to sign a contract, that they're going to be doing good behavior before this, and and that they're going to spend time in prayer for for this festival, and I'm like, you guys got to realize, like, this is not the only thing they're doing this year, and having to like bring we always often had to bring the reality to these mega pastors or these preachers and these because they were a little bit more business orientated. It was kind of like the church was run more like a business at the time than like a church. Like, we've got to, IBM doesn't allow. I remember Bobby would bring his dog to work, and they would be like, "Do you think IBM allows their people to bring the dog to work?" And we're trying to like, it's not about. That's not what this is. This is a church. This is not a corporation. But I moved off to New York after this, and my life kind of started to fall apart. And the last time I saw Bobby was at my mom's memorial. And Bobby had so much shame that he goes like, I don't know how to be your friend. I feel like I've done something wrong. And I'm like, you are my friend, and I don't care. Like, I care about your ex-wife. She's wonderful. She's also my friend, but I care about both of you equally. You have grace here. And Bobby ended up pulling away, not taking my phone calls. It was like he disappeared. And I found out today from a lot of his friends is that's what happened. He just kind of did his own thing and kind of just had to change his life. He couldn't live in that world anymore because he had felt like he had let people down so badly that it was as though he was tainted, and that he just couldn't face the life that his one decision screwed everything up for him, and he felt like I can't do it. Like, I just can't live this way. And I would often encourage him and say, listen, I think you can go back. I'm like, you're a great pastor, man. Like, we can't lose you. We've got to restoration. And he just said it wasn't possible. And so people, when they often hear me talk about grace with asterisks, like, we always want to put an asterisk on grace and who it's for. When I hear people kind of celebrating the fall of ministers and things like that, which often are ministers that I didn't like either, or mega church pastors, but there's a lot of like, oh, good, and I hope they don't come back, and I hope they don't, and all this stuff. And I understand some of those feelings and hurt and pain, but I also understand that, like, for every like giant, huge televangelist or mega church pastor, there's all these small pastors all over the world who make mistakes too and fail. And when we continue to put an asterisk by grace, or an asterisk by forgiveness, or an asterisk by restoration, and we feel that there needs to be vengeance and a payment, I often think the concept of hell grew so strong because people, especially people, who were occupied by Roman territory, felt like they would never get justice, and hell almost became this one day we'll get justice when people are tortured for eternity. But we still sometimes hunger for a justice that is not justice, that's not just. that is one mistake and everything's done. It's over. And we don't think about these some of these folks who are great people who made a mistake and deserve to be forgiven. You know, I've always thought about, what does it say to the people in congregations and in communities when they see that this person is you know, above that. And this isn't one of someone who is abusing their position and trying to hurt people. This was a mistake, and mistakes happen. But I was thinking about the verse that I often talk about in, you know, I mean, one of the reasons I'm talking about Bobby like this is because, I mean, like, those books led me to a different place. His friendship led me to a different place and a deeper understanding of grace. And this evolution that's continued in my life and in my work, and what this whole work is based on, is grace, and allowed me to even see grace at even such a deeper level. You know, he had such a powerful influence on my work, and such a powerful influence on the people that he knew, even though he was completely human. He was a very complicated person. You know, his emotions were sometimes completely out of whack. I used to be like, okay, we got to reset you, dude, because he would just start to blink, and he would just be like, I just can't take this, you know. And I would like, dude, breathe, just breathe. You need a little reset here, you know. But we were fighting the good fight, you know. We felt like we were fighting the good fight against, like, legalism. We felt like, you know, this is our fight. Even though we would argue about, like, how it works, we would still knew that we were in it together, and we were brothers. And it was painful when we separated, and I always wondered if it was something I did, or if it was his shame, or that was a reminder of the past, you know. But today I found out that I wasn't the only person who he just kind of pulled away from. And so this is even where people tried to do restoration. This is a situation where people tried to help, at least help, and really reached out to him. One of my ex-father-in-law was really working with him to try to continue to keep him connected somehow. And Bobby just pulled away. I think of all the kids and all the people and all the folks around us that he just always tried to be good to. And unfortunately, one bad decision, he felt like just null and voided all of that. So when we put asterisks on grace or decide who gets it and who's worthy of restoration, this is what happens often. And it's been so beaten into our minds and to our souls that we don't believe it. And I think there's two ways we see that. We see it when someone like Bobby just can't accept it, even though he knew it. And we also see this often with how people in Christian communities act, as though, even progressive Christian communities act as though there's no grace deserved for their enemies, or for those who've made mistakes, or those who may think differently than them. And so we have a very broken community that doesn't seem to either understand forgiveness or understand grace, to the point where a lot of us can't even receive grace. You know, we can't even accept it into our lives. You know, it is really, sometimes that is the biggest thing, is that sometimes you accept grace for others, or even for me, I think you accept grace for other people first, and then you accept it for yourself, and then you go through going like trying to accept it for other people, especially when they're your enemies. So why do I always, you know, this is the reason why I always harp on that idea. We love our enemies. We do good to those who persecute us. You know, we forgive each other. And in Galatians 6 is one that I've nailed a million times, and I talk about all year long. And people often think I'm just speaking out of it because I didn't see restoration for my family. But here's another example of lack of what I think is proper restoration and biblical restoration. You know, if God is truly God, if God is truly the ground of being, then it should be something that's amazing and miraculous, and that confines us, and that causes us to think differently, and it causes us to have to kind of go, okay, there's forgiveness for this person. Because if we want to accept forgiveness, we are going to have to accept forgiveness for other people as well. And in 6, it says, my friends, if anyone, Galatians 6:1, if anyone is detected in transgression, You who have received the Spirit should restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. It goes on to say don't fall into the same thing, but I think that's one of the reasons Paul's talking about that, is because he's dealing with legalism and restoring people from divided thinking and from prejudice and that type of thing. But this is restore such one in a spirit of gentleness. And that's what we're called to do. It's so desperate that, like, if we only do this every once in a while, people won't believe it. You know, it's like, well, maybe I'm just surrounded by people who are just too good, but everybody else isn't that good, and I just don't feel like I've done it, and I failed too much. I don't know what happened in my buddy's mind, in Bobby's mind. But I know that it reminds me of this song David Bazan used to sing, and it was, I don't know if it was the name of the song or it was just in the lyrics, but it was this, he said over and over, save your applause until the end of the show. And this idea of, like, you might not like things you see during the show. You might like things you see, but just wait. Wait to judge at the end. And I look at my friend Bobby's life, and I think the hurt and the pain that he caused people around him, but mostly the hurt and pain that he could not let go of. The grace that he felt like he could not accept. I think speaks loudly of just a situation that people often find themselves in. And these expectations that we have on ourselves and on others. I do not know Bobby's cause of death. And I found out that today I reached out to some other friends of Bobby's, and they said, yeah, we haven't seen him. I thought maybe he'd passed. We couldn't tell. And then one friend said, yeah, I Google him every week, and I found this obituary that I think is Bobby, and I'm pretty sure it was Bobby's, and it's 2022. So Bobby's been gone for 2 years, and literally some of the closest people in his life just found out today. So I spent a lot of time crying in my car today, and I think I needed it. Strangely enough, last night my neighbors were having a party downstairs, and so I turned on Nick Cave's book, that interview book that he does, and he was talking all about mourning and how he had to mourn his son and what it was like to go through mourning. And then I wake up today and find this news out, and in some ways I felt like it was a gift from Bobby, because I feel like I've been in a lot of praying lately and a lot of darkness lately myself, and it allowed me to just cry and take some of that bitterness and hurt and fear that I've been feeling also to go with the mourning of my friend Bobby. I wanted to do this talk because I felt like I didn't get a chance to go to his funeral and speak about his life. There was no memorial. I thought Bobby just went to another town and started another life. His parents were gone by the time he passed, so there wasn't really a whole lot of family around, and no one knew. Brings back a lot of early memories. A lot of the beginnings of Revolution in Atlanta, where I think we did a lot of incredible work, and Bobby played a part in that. You know, there were times where Bobby was a board member for Revolution, and you know, he was there and stuck by me when I said, hey, I'm going to tell everybody it's okay to be gay, you know, like, this is happening, man. And we would still go find Brendan Manning whenever we got. He also introduced me to Henry Nouwen, and he also gave me that book, The Prodigal Son, about the prodigal son painting, that was really beautiful. And we could find grace in the most interesting places together. But I just want to focus on this restoration and gentleness, and my hope is that we learn from each other's life experiences, that we can understand what it's like when others go through pain. I am so used to being part of the church. Like, really, the emergent church was a great community to be a part of, because there was a lot of us to kind of understand each other's issues and pain and struggles. But most of my work with communities of believers, there's often this wanting to put an asterisk by even your experience. I often talk about my experience growing up and why I don't like scapegoating, and people are like, yeah, but that's just one issue. We got to speak truth to power. We got to do this. There's always an if, ands, and buts, and I'm not disagreeing with them. I understand it, but there's also the idea that we have to realize that there's great nuances in life. We don't know where people are and what people are going through. We don't know what their personalities are, and it's very easy to dance on the graves of others and celebrate our righteousness somehow, or somehow it celebrates maybe the legalism that they did to us or the hurt they practice on us. It justifies it by them not being perfect human beings. I will give you this: there is no perfect human beings. There are no perfect pastors. If you are a part of a community where someone is making you think they're perfect, I would say it might be time to leave the community or go and ask the pastor their faults, or the preacher or the teachers or whatever, because there's no perfect humans. It's sad that we allow our leaders to be on pedestals like that, and sometimes they're often happy to be on those pedestals. I miss my friend. I'm heartbroken that he felt like he had to escape this and that I didn't get to tell him what he meant to me, and that a lot of us didn't, because he ran, because shame is so powerful. And the thing is, you think like so many hurt Christians who are like, well, I had to leave this church because I felt so much shame and I felt so much hurt, and you don't realize that these leaders sometimes feel as much shame, and the shame is just because they love you and they care about you and they didn't want to let you down and they didn't want to hurt you. They didn't want to be hypocrites. No one sets out to be a hypocrite. No one sets out to be a legalistic bastard. Often we become victims of tradition and misinformation, because that leads us into these ways, and sometimes it's those breaks that actually save us. I think about verses that God loves you no matter who you are, no matter what you've done. All fall short of God's standard, but yet in his gracious kindness declares us not guilty. Those were verses that we would often talk about. I think about Corinthians 13, 4-7, that talks about love never giving up, never demanding its own way, keeping no record of when it's been wronged. And when you see things like that, and when you see the things that Paul says and that Jesus says about loving others, it's really this concept of like, it's not something you get to opt out of, but we've allowed our own emotions and our own mental health and our own ideas to often opt out of that. And like I've always said, and I always say, it's not perfection, it's progress. No one's going to do this perfectly. But this is still one of the reasons I preach grace every day, and I don't want people to live a life of shame and guilt. When you mess up and you feel shame and feel guilt, that might be good for a little while, but there is a time where you have to be restored and you have to move forward. And you have to realize that people's opinions of yourself are not your business. What someone's thinks about me is not really my business until they try to make it my business. I know a lot of people don't think positively about me and my work, and I have to realize that's not my business. That's their story, and there's a reason that I fit in that way within their story and their experiences. I was thinking about, I often say we got to kick against the pricks. And I was thinking about this last night. And it's the thorn bush of pricks is what it was. And it's actually what Paul hears when he's on the road to Damascus is and it's only in the King James version. And so people think it may have been added to sound similar to what was said later in the book of Acts. Because this is early on in Acts, and then when his story is being retold, Jesus says, why do you kick against the pricks? Meaning me, you're hurting yourself fighting me. But I often think that we in the church, capital C, if you will, and in religion, there's a lot of things about thorns and pricks that separate us and that choke us and, cause us to die and not follow Jesus, for those kind of reasons. And I often think, like, when we're hurt and stuff, like, it's almost like just these thorn bushes become around us. And it's like, are you going to be willing to hurt? Because loving people hurts. Are you going to be willing to kick against the pricks to love others? Are you willing to do some gardening? Maybe you got to put on your grace gloves, your gardening gloves. I learned that. I'm doing a lot of that for my landlord for my rent. And, he's like, you're wearing gloves, aren't you? I was like, don't worry about it. And then I thorns all in my hands and picking up weird worms. So I've got some gloves. But those things that often separate us, that the world makes and almost communities make, where they just thorny bushes all around us. And they keep us separated. And sometimes this work is going to require that we also kick against the pricks, but not in the way of trying to destroy Christianity, but maybe saving it. Because a lot of those pricks are the misinformation or the traditions that we've passed down. I was reading a comment on YouTube from just one of my little vignettes that I gave, and someone's like, yeah, but being a Christian isn't about being nice and winning people over, because they didn't like that I was gay affirming. And so it's like, and I'm going like, well, what about what Jesus says at the Last Supper? I'm giving you a new commandment. I want you to love each other as I love you. Why does Jesus have to go through why does Jesus have to go through that area to go see that woman at the well? Why does he feel like I have to go speak to her? It's not to judge her and make her feel bad by saying you are not even married to the man you're with now, because probably she wasn't able to have children, and that's probably why she was passed around the way she was, is once they realized she was no value, because that marriage was really screwy and really different, in a different culture and in a different time for us. But he had to go through and give this woman hope and give the outcast of the town a hope to go back into the community and say, here's a man who told me everything I know about me. Come meet him. I think it's the Messiah. That's who Jesus reveals himself to. Why does Paul say love never gives up, never loses faith? Why does, 1 John say, which we've talked about all these this year, why does 1 John say, if you can't love people you can see, how can you love a God you can't see? You see what I'm saying here? So people get confused. They think, well, we don't got to, because they make it into like it becomes about sin regulation or which we know is separation, but it becomes about this like, are you a good person or you don't do this? It becomes like these lists, and we become like these monitors of good behavior versus bad behavior. And we make it about that, and then all of a sudden people say, well, you don't have to be nice. Well, the reason they're saying you don't have to be nice is because often legalism and that idea of Christianity creates this very much it's not a compromised love. It's more of a counterfeit love that pretends to be love but is not love at all, that speaks cruelly and speaks harshly and is not gentle. Even in another one of Paul's writings, he says, if someone asks you a question, be ready to give an answer, but to give that answer in a spirit of gentleness. So to say that it's not about loving other people, or it's not about being kind to other people, or whatever, that's just not true. That's not. Christianity is about loving other people and being kind. And love doesn't demand its own way. And unfortunately, the people we see on TV and a lot of denominations and a lot of things have gotten it wrong. And so what happens when we get wrong is we lose amazing people like Bobby. So there is a price that happens when we don't restore. There is a price when we don't reach out to the hurting. And there is a price even when we can't accept it. I don't know what that is, but today I just want to say, like, thank you, Bobby. Well done, good and faithful servant. Your life will continue to live on. Your love and your grace will continue to live on into a lot of the people's lives that you made a huge difference in. Josh, Paul, me, Bill and Sheila, Amanda, all these people who you showed so much love and so much grace to. And we're sorry. I wish I could have told you more, that we loved you more. And that shame was bullshit. I just wish I would have had a freaking raw, hard. I wish I would have had the chance to just shake him and say, you're loved, you're accepted, move on. Don't live in this failure. Don't live in this hurt and this pain. I tried. A lot of us tried. So please, it's right before this. It says, if instead you might devour one another, be careful that you don't destroy each other. I mean, it could be that even when we do the right thing, that there's so much history and so much religious and legalism around everything that it's hard to break through and help people understand that grace is real, that it's good news. I remember calling my dad when I first started realizing about grace, and I said, why didn't you preach more about this and tell me more about this? And he goes, because it felt like it was too good to be true. That's why I say grace, no asterisk. Grace is anarchy. It's always affirming people we don't want affirmed. It's always forgiving and loving those people. I'm not saying if someone hurts you and makes you feel bad that you have to stay in their life. But I'm saying allow other people to come and be healers. Allow other people to come in and do restoration. Often you see these pastors come back, and it's not that they had a restoration process. It's just it's the only thing they knew to do. And so now they're coming back just unhealthy and hurt and just feeling like, well, and that's not a way to do it either. I've seen many come back and just dive into legalism because they were so ashamed of their own pain that they just thought they're still fighting something that went from like, oh, this is sin in my life, to like, now it's not, now it's regret. And it's still like they're not giving themselves grace, often because you can see through their own words that they're tortured individuals projecting judgment and shame and hate onto others. So it is complicated. That's why I think philosophy is important. It helps us realize how complicated and horrific these situations can be. That it's not easy. But the thorns, much like sin, is separation. So I ask people in the Revolution community to kick against the pricks and help remind people that they are accepted, and even help people who are hurt by other people to remind them, like, hey, they hurt you and that was wrong, but they also were deserving of grace. Because maybe it's the type of thing that it has to become secondhand to us, that we know that even people who hurt us deserve forgiveness. And sometimes you forgive people and you just have to pull away completely. And I think that's where that comes when Jesus says, do good to your enemies, and he says, pray for your enemies. I think sometimes it's just like, pray for those people, because you're not going to be the one that does that. But maybe celebrate them when they do get that. Because often we don't realize is that those very enemies allow us to see something within ourselves that we don't like, and helps us to move away from that. Helps us to move away from that judgment, helps us move away from that legalism, helps us move away from that need for control. We see it and it hurts us, but that hurt allows us to go, this isn't the way, And so sometimes I remember doing a sermon once saying that we should write our enemies thank you letters for them, for us not having to become like them, because we were able to see it. And even if they hurt us, it was able to hurt us to the point where we realized, I can't treat others this way. And so I know right now I'm trying to find the good in every bad. But to me, that's what the amazing thing about Christianity, and the amazing thing about grace, and why I practice Christianity, and why I talk about Christianity, and why I talk about grace, because I find it to be truly amazing. It's wild, because I look at Bobby's life, and I look at the talks that we had and the conversations we had, and the wisdom that he brought, and the sermons he would share with me, bring me cassette tapes, listen to this, listen to that, listen to this, and it's funny because I almost see, like, in some ways his life opened up the door for me when I met Pete Rollins. Pete Rollins, man, that guy's, he's brilliant. He's my best buddy. So, I mean, I think he's a little too brilliant, but, but even those sowings and those seeds that he sowed and allowed in there, that allowed me to go and deal with this guy who made me question my whole faith and revamp everything. and how Paul Tillich is a place where we found common ground, because Pete's like, I'm not sure you're going to like Paul Tillich. But then I was like, this guy sounds so familiar. And then I remember the book that Bobby gave me had Paul Tillich in it. So now I've got all this Paul Tillich stuff. It changed my life, and it's like this evolution that he played such a huge part in my evolution of being brave enough and willing to stand against those who might not like what I do, but still with the hope that I help them understand it and that I help reveal the truth to them. And not necessarily my truth, but I help them know that they're accepted, so maybe they have to stop projecting that pain onto other people. But man, even folks like me, because Bobby and me we were equals, man. Screw up, do something wrong bad enough, you start to question the very existence of grace. It's so hard to believe. I mean, obviously my dad spent his whole life in ministry and told me it seemed too good to be true. And what we have to do in the work of Revolution is to help people realize that grace isn't too good to be true. And I was thinking about 2 or 3 gathered together. What do I love when I love God? I love my neighbor. I love the others. And the presence of God. How do I experience the presence of God as well? That's why we're called Revolution Gathering now, is because when 2 or 3 or 4 come together, that's where the Spirit is. That's where the ground of being becomes a reality. And I've been grateful to be able to see that many times in my life, including with Bobby. So thank you, Bobby. I haven't said his last name just because I don't know what family's out there, what else is going on. But Bobby was a great friend, and haphazardly human as myself. And I don't know what happened, but I know that I'm sorry that it did, and I'm sorry that he's gone, and I remember him. And I hope that this talk encourages you. I hope his life and the example of his life encourages you all to be great friends. I mean, and love people more and restore people more and remind people that, shame might serve a purpose for a temporary time, but there's times that you have to get up and move on and wipe the dust off your feet. And, it's okay to know your weaknesses. It's good to know your weaknesses. But anyway, that's the kind of the memorial I didn't get to give him. And thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. I honestly just found out today. I did a talk yesterday. I'm recording this on, what is today? Even it's Monday. I just felt like I had to do it right away while it was fresh. And but just continue to pray for the people who are finding this out now, and his friends and his family. And Bobby, thanks for continuing to gift me this. My work, my love for grace continues to be inspired by you, Bobby. Wherever you are, you continue to inspire me, and you continue to inspire so many other people, and you did not live a life that was in vain. You made an impact on this world, and I'm grateful for it. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Revolution today. As always, we can use your support. You can go to revolutionchurch.com for that, but I'll just leave it there. If you want to support, it's great. We can use it, but otherwise, we'll continue this work either way. We're going to continue it. Love you all very much. Bye-bye. Hug each other. Tell each other you love each other. Make sure you tell people how important they are in your life, okay? All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.